This
January
conference
19th.
will now be recorded.
Okay, now good evening, everybody. Welcome to the January 19th, 2021 meeting of the East Bridgewater Finance Committee. As we all know, this meeting is being recorded as we're still not meeting in person. Hopefully that'll change soon, especially now that we're talking about vaccines, which is a nice thing. So tonight we have we're starting our budget presentation. So we have our two chiefs with us tonight, Chief of Police and Fire Chief, who'll be talking about each of their respective departments, as well as together discussing the central dispatch budget. So that being said, I think we can probably go right into Chief Karen, if you want to. Brian, I will, while we're talking, I'll dig up my copy of Central Dispatch.
Thank you.
And whenever you're ready, Chief, you can take the floor.
Very good. Thank you for your time. I don't have any PowerPoint presentations, anything like that. Nothing's really changed from last year when I presented the PowerPoint. I don't know if there's anybody new on the board or not, but the budget that I'm putting forth for town meeting, hopefully, is the FY22 level service budget. And if you just want to go line by line, if I have fire department salaries, pretty much everything in there except for call fire salaries is contractual. The call department salaries are not contractual. However, I do have 4 call firefighters right now, and the future of that program, I'm uncertain of, depending on whether or not I can get staffing, full-time staffing added at another date. But I want to touch upon that after I do my budget presentation. Is anybody having trouble hearing me? Good. Civilian dispatch, obviously you'll notice in the line item, it's not in my budget. It was obviously removed last year on July 1st, and it was placed to its own separate budget. So the overall increase across the board, no matter which budget you're looking at, and we're only talking right now about the green and the yellow columns. I'm not going to talk about the blue column because that's added manpower. That's something it was just for you people to have an idea about when I present a potential grant application I may go for. So anything in the green and yellow on department salaries is contractual, and pretty much nothing can change. Additional compensation, the level service budget is, you'll notice there was a change in cover sick. I had it as 39,000, but it was supposed to be 30,900. That's a 2% increase with the time and a half, and that only covers a portion of what I would normally use for sick leave. Everything else in the green column is a man-for-man or firefighter for firefighter coverage budget. So if someone's off, that position's filled, so I can adequately staff for whatever may occur during the day or night and have sufficient manpower, well, so to say, to do the job. The level service one, you'll see there's a, well, first of all, let me just add something to the level service one. So you'll notice there's a decrease overall from the FY21 to the FY22 budget. And that's because due to contract negotiations we did last year, we were able to move the night shift differential from a additional comp line item, and it was put into the base of the firefighters, pretty much eliminating that column. There's $1,000 earmarked for that, just in case a firefighter has to work for an officer and they have to be paid for acting out of grade. That was pretty much the only change contractually, and that's why there's the additional compensation for FY22 level service is about $48,000 less than what it was for the year we're in now. For the 0% budget, there's a decrease of $154,000, and that translates into 82 24-hour shifts that'll be vacant when the employees use their contractual time off. that obviously does not include long-term illness or injury. Anything that's on the job injury or a long-term illness, I just don't have money in the budget on any year to cover that. So most of those shifts also run short. But 82 shifts guaranteed with the zero budget, there'll be 82 shifts that'll go unfilled. And I'll probably end up having to take the second ambulance off the road for those shifts, which potentially could, you know, we could depend, the town potentially could lose ambulance revenue by doing that. I can't say how much. It all depends on how often we have a double medical on those shifts. We do have double medicals often, but it's kind of an unknown, just like callback. You know, I never know how busy we're going to be with, you know, fires, storms, or whatever. For expenses, there shows a reduction in expenses of about $4,300, but in essence, it was just moved from fire department expenses to ambulance expenses. You know, doing an audit of the budget, we were paying a line item for something ambulance related, a license agreement or something that was being paid out of the wrong expense item. So that was just moved down to ambulance operation, which in turn allows us to be, you know, that money to be recouped later in the year through the Massachusetts CPE program, which is when they have excess, you know, Medicare money. We submit a cost report, and we usually end up getting back. I actually forget what we got back last year, but it's usually some pretty significant amount of money. And yeah, I don't have that number in front of me, but I think it was about $48,000 to $58,000, but I could be wrong. And the ambulance operation pretty much it only increased by that $4,670, which was part of the licensing. And I believe that has to do with my online training. We moved to an online training scenario where firefighters can do their continuing education online. And it actually worked out really well with COVID, considering everything went online anyways. So that's good. That's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Well, Tim, I have a question here. I'm a little confused, and maybe I'm reading this sheet a little bit wrong. If I look at zero increase, that would mean to me the same as last year's actual. How can it be $154,000 less for actual for salaries?
Dave, I never took out the actual civilian dispatch that I paid last year when I did my original budget. I never deducted it. Therefore, that's why it's so much lower. Brian caught it last Friday and said, "Hey, you never took out your civilian dispatch." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, you're right, but I kept the ambulance revenue that's going to offset it the same." But still, to show what the actual numbers would be, yeah, I would have to deduct that what I would normally budget for civilian dispatch, because I'm not doing that this year.
So that 131 in FY21 isn't really there, shouldn't be there.
Yeah, we need to we'll delete that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not there at all. I mean, if you look in the colored columns, it's not there. In the white columns, which just shows a difference between the two, it shows that it's not there. It was taken away.
Okay. Can we
But
go?
Dave, we're going to move it completely out of this budget into its own, so that in our worksheet that will completely come out. That whole line will be removed. And yes.
So next year, yeah. So next year when I do this, I won't even have a line for it. Correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Correct.
It messed you up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm simple-minded.
Well, Brian caught it at 3:45 on a Friday, so that was helpful. But that's okay. I was able to rework it today. So these are the actual numbers minus the civilian dispatch portion of it. And for the FY22, you know, like that 0% increase, it's actually a 5/100ths of a percent increase. So sorry, I wasn't able to get down to an actual zero. it's about $260. I think it's over zero. But by my numbers, the level service budget with contractual obligations is an increase of, it looks like about 4.2%.
So in reality, the final number at the bottom, which I can't scroll down to, in the yellow column, is what your FY21 budget really is. Because you're taking 131,000. Yeah, okay, close.
Yeah, it's off by like $170 or something.
Yeah.
So the FY, I have numbers right here. So the FY21 budget minus civilian dispatch was $2,723,236.09. So I'm off by $100 and something
Yeah.
for the zero.
Okay.
And the variance for the level services is 114.5. Just to make it once we remove the civilian dispatch.
Okay.
Oh, I don't have that number. See, it's $114,000. I didn't have time to do that.
Yeah, I just did it on my end. Yeah.
So it'd be $114,000 less than what I have budgeted this year.
No,
understand?
your level services will be an increase of 114,500.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yes.
Okay.
So real quick, I think, just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. The major difference between your 0% and your level service is those 82 shifts that would go uncovered. Is that that's the major difference between the two budgets?
Yes.
Okay.
But that's a double-edged sword because for those 82 shifts, we may not get ambulance revenue for those.
Right.
82.
No, I understand that. I just
And
want to make sure I didn't miss another area.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's going to be a significant amount of money, but it could be. I don't know.
Yeah,
Some days,
Yeah, I can't predict that.
Correct. Do anybody else have any other questions?
So that's just so we've just kind of gone through level funded and level services. So anybody else have any questions on those two lines or columns? Okay, no, looks like we're good.
Okay, so the blue column. So the FEMA has grants that I'm usually fairly successful with assistance to firefighters grants, so I can buy equipment, and we've done that pretty successfully over the last 10, 15 years. They also have another grant called, it's a SAFER grant, and it's a staffing for adequate fire and emergency response. It will pay salaries, overtime, health insurance, pretty much any cost associated with hiring firefighters for 3 years at 100%. So the blue column, I just put in as, I put in there what it would cost without that grant. And, it's a pretty good size jump. But I will probably try and apply for a SAFER grant this year for 3 new firefighters. And the reason being is because, so when I got on the job 30 years ago, we recall people, they came back. That was just the way it was. That doesn't really happen today. Not like it should, unfortunately. It's just different times. It is what it is. But when I staff a 5-man or 5 firefighter shift and 2 ambulances goes out, there's only 1 firefighter left back. So I have to recall people anyways to at least have 2 people back, which still is well below the national, the NFPA standard for an engine company, which should be 4 firefighters on an engine company. We can do that if we have full staff and go to a house fire like we did the other day, but we can't do that if we have an ambulance out. So if 1 ambulance was out, there'd only be 3 people back. If I got a SAFER grant to hire 3 new firefighters, I would move my administrative day lieutenant back on a shift and be able to have 4 6-man shifts. So if we had an issue like I have going on now, and that I seem to have like every year, where somebody goes out for an on-the-job injury that's long-term or long-term sick leave, I wouldn't have to drop to 4. I would be dropping to 5, and I'd still be able to run efficiently like we're doing now with 5 people. But when the problem happens is when I have to drop to 4, any second call, I have to dump the fire station. And there's no guarantee that someone's going to come back in for the coverage assignment, which doesn't let me sleep well at night, because if somebody has, cardiac arrest or a house fire during that period of time when the station's empty, no one from East Bridgewater is coming. It'll be from somebody from out of town, and if they're busy too, then there'll be even a longer, response time. And obviously, we all know, with the cardiac arrest, these seconds count. And the same thing actually goes for fire. Every time, every fires grow or double in size every minute. So that's what I'm looking to do. It's a 3-year deal, 100%. And then at the end of 3 years, or the 4th year, the town would have to pick up the tab. But hopefully by then we'd be way past our, or lay the people off. So I don't want to think that, they absolutely have to be employed there. But if we're going to go through this route and employ them, then we should try to maintain them. I have contemplated doing a Proposition 2.5 override, because it seems like every year, we do budgets. It's always, where can we cut? Where can we cut? Last year we had a pretty good year, and I appreciate the support we had last year. And COVID kind of, put a monkey wrench into it this year. And hopefully, with the vaccines that are now coming out, we'll be able to get back to some type of normalcy by, June, July, and have the second half of next fiscal year the second half of next calendar year to recuperate. And hopefully the year after that, we'll be back to normal. But, having said that, this town, to my knowledge, has never done a Proposition 2.5 override. And it's something we really probably should think about.
Operational.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, fire, we're getting busier. Police, they're getting busier. Schools, same deal. I mean, to try to, efficiently and safely run a public safety department, when, for most of my career as chief, with the exception of last year, I've always had one hand tied behind my back. It gets old, and I think the townspeople need to be educated, and it's ultimately their choice. If that's what they want, then then that's what they'll get. But if they want something that services when they call, that we show up promptly and are able to do the job, then I think the town should at least entertain a Prop 2.5 override in the future. I don't think now is definitely not the time with COVID, but in the coming years, I think it'd be a good idea. That's just my
just don't present it when they pay their tax bill.
No, I understand, Dave.
Okay.
Mine would go up significantly. I get it.
So I have one more question here with the girl with the numbers over here. If I understand this correctly, because I don't want people asking questions later, the yellow column at 0 increase is really what the true budget is for this year, right? So the level services should be based off of that, which is really like a 5% increase, not a 0.465, because we should.
No. It's a 4.2% increase. Dave, I honestly, I forgot to delete that number. It's
Okay.
4.2% increase.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a decrease.
All right, and then the blue column would be a higher increase also, right? It'd be more like in the 10% range or so?
10.7.
Okay, all right. So this, we
I
just
didn't
haven't
even do that.
corrected this sheet. Okay, all right.
I didn't even bother changing the blue column, because it's not something I'm pursuing this year,
Okay.
monetarily at least.
Okay,
I just wanted the committee to be able to see line item by line item, what it would cost if I was to add 3 firefighters this year, which I'm not planning to. If I don't get a grant, then I'm not doing that. And I want to talk to the Board of Selectmen anyways about, their thoughts on it as well before I, go through with this. The grant period is not open yet, so it's not like I'm under the gun to get it done.
So I have a question, Chief. So that scenario you described where the guys are out in the ambulance and then someone calls in for fire. And then I guess we have to call to a neighboring town for mutual aid. Is that?
Yes, we do it. Well, it depends. You mean if the station's empty?
Well, the way you said it was like if you have the ambulance out and then someone calls for has a fire, then you're shorthanded, right?
Well, we're shorthanded from a fire, even if I'm fully staffed, because you can't put a house fire out with 4 or 5 people. So it's a full department callback for that. And, we just had one on Chestnut Street last week, and I only got 5 people back on recall. So I only had 10 people from East Bridgewater there. And right off the bat, 2 people had to be taken right off the fire and put in an ambulance to transport a gentleman to Mass General, which dropped me down to 8.
Wow.
But
Right.
even, on a regular day, we're still going mutual aid no matter what, because we'll never have enough people to effectively and safely put out a structure fire, which is why we have an automatic aid response from the nearest community. And then if it turns into a working fire, which is, most of these structure fires will turn into a working fire, it brings in another extra engine company from out of town and a second engine company to cover the East Bridgewater station, because we're obviously no one's going to be there. And then a second line would bring another 2 engines in the ladder and pretty much a RIT chief, or rapid intervention chief, from out of town as well.
Right.
It's very common and pretty much.
You.
Well, but that's the way it's been for 30 years, no matter what. I mean, our small towns like that, we can't do it on our own.
Yeah.
The city of Brockton,
Right.
they respond, 3 engines and 2 ladders, and they're good. That's like 20 people right off the bat. We don't have that luxury. That's my whole fire department,
So how often did that come up last year? Does that come up like a couple times, a lot? Like just trying to get a feel for the, what the exposure is.
We actually had a pretty busy year this year with house fires. The good thing is none of them went to a second alarm. Most of them just went to a working fire, and one of them I think was just calling an automatic 8-inch company. But if my memory serves correct, and I'm getting old, so I might be off by one, we had either had 5 or 6 structure fires in the last 6 months, which is unusual for East Bridgewater. It's unusual for East Bridgewater. But on the flip side, we could go 18 months without having a structure fire. So
You never know.
who knows? I don't know if it's because people are home due to COVID, and obviously, people make mistakes and things happen. I don't know what it is or why it happened.
Yeah, no rhyme or reason. All right, thanks. That's helpful, I think, for people to understand. That's not a good
You're
scenario at all. What you.
We figure every time an ambulance goes out, there's 2 people that have to be on that ambulance. So if I have 5 working, 2 have to go, it leaves 3 people back for the next call. So.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions for Chief Heron? None? Great.
We have one question that came in today. When's the new ladder truck arrive?
I just got pictures of it today, the cab and all that, so it's still scheduled to be here in May.
Thank you.
Which would have made a big difference on the Chestnut Street fire, because the tower truck that we have now missed the roof by about 15 feet.
Oh, wow.
The new one would have had an extra 25 feet, but it is what it is.
Well, that's interesting, because how many people stepped up at town meeting when we were discussing that and said, how often do we really need, a ladder truck? And there you go.
Right. Well, my same answer is the same as it was before. If it saves one kid at the central school or saves one life in town, it paid for itself.
It depends if it's my house or yours.
My
You
house
don't
is
live in
tall.
town, we're good.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. And if we have no other questions, then we're going to move on to, we're going to do central dispatch where both chiefs will present. So
I've made you the presenter.
thank you. All right. All right. So Chief O'Brien, what I did was I took the information that you gave me, which is down here a little bit, and I put it into just kind of our normal format, and I included our FY21 numbers. So if you want, I'll scroll down a little to the section that you completed, if you want to go through that first, and then we can kind of go back up and do the comparison to FY21.
Okay, what we have is we have 7 full-time dispatchers and 1 part-time dispatcher. The 7 full-time dispatchers work a 4 and 2 schedule, just like a police officer. And it breaks it down by how many hours, how many the part-time one works. We have on-call dispatch. They all, full-timers make $21 an hour. The on-call makes $19 an hour. And we built in some sick leave, some vacation coverage, personal, and overtime for emergency coverage in there. And it's pretty self-explanatory.
Okay, so then what I did was we just took that. Now this is central dispatch combined in total versus if we were looking at it last year, as we talked about in fire, it was split between 50-50 between the fire and the police budget. So that's how it's in the budget for last year. I believe we have it split out into its own department. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but I believe Phyllis has already done that. So it's now tracking. It's now tracking as its own department. So we've gone ahead and subtotaled it and done the comparison FY21 to FY22. I did go ahead and put a note up here that when we initially were talking about this program, I went back to my notes. We had been talking about, and I think this was one of my questions for the 2 chiefs. When we did this last year, we were talking about 5 full-time and 3 part-time dispatchers. And that number has now changed, and we're talking a fairly substantial increase in central dispatch from last year, understanding it was brand new and just ramping up. Can either one of you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I needed 7 full-timers to cover 2 dispatchers on the day shift, 2 dispatchers on the 4 to 12, and 1 on the midnights. And the part-time one, she splits her duties with animal control officer and part-time dispatcher. That filled in the 2 vacant shifts.
So we're running central dispatch for all 3 shifts a day.
Correct.
Okay. And is that a change over what we initially talked about when it was initially proposed? I believe we maybe weren't thinking about the overnight.
I don't know how, I mean, overnight, we were thinking of staffing it with just having a part-time list, but it's impossible to get people to come in when they're on a part-time basis.
All right.
I think one of the things there was going to be an impact shift. There'd be 2 full-timers in the day, but then there'd be like an impact shift for, I believe, 4 hours, Chief. Is that correct? But it was determined that it was necessary to have the 2 full-timers pretty much from 8 a.m. till midnight, and then only 1 on midnight because, the call volume, at least on the fire side, tends to be much less, which is why I believe the part-timers, that it just wasn't going to work.
Yeah, I believe that's what I had in my notes as well. Are we comfortable now that this, and how long have we been at this staffing level, and does this staffing level seem to be where we need to be?
I believe it's where we need to be. We've done a lot of training with the fire department. Myself, Timmy, and the command staff are monitoring all the 911 calls. It seems to be working out quite well right now.
Yeah, I would agree. We started doing it, I believe, last June, and with the expected bumps in the road, like we knew what there was going to be because it was brand new for them. We've come a long way. I think we've come a long way, and it's actually working out pretty good. I could sleep a little easier at night knowing that even if my station's empty, there's someone still there that's able to answer a phone, or if somebody walks into the fire station, they can pick up a phone and it rings right to the dispatch center. So if they needed help, somebody would be able to help them, rather than the way it was before was nobody was there.
Mhm.
So have we looked at our digested regional dispatch? I know some other towns around us have looked at and have gone to actually regional dispatch. Is that of any benefit to us?
Can I handle this one, chiefs?
Go ahead.
I've looked at it and discussed it with the other town administrators that have gone to regionalized dispatch. No one has saved money. They've always spent about the same or more. So it's unless you're gonna withdraw staffing the front desk at the police department overnight or the second and third shift, there's really practically no savings. But we're always looking at that, but I'm a little disappointed that the regional dispatch has not lived up to the claims that it will save money.
Yeah, I mean, they have an incentive right now to kind of bait you in, which is, 3 years they pay 100%. Then the fourth year it's like 50%, and the fifth year it's 25%. The sixth year you own it, the whole kit and caboodle. And I don't think it's like a collective bargaining agreement where we get to bargain what our share is going to be. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, you probably know more about it than I do. You pretty much sent a bill. This is what it's going to cost.
That's
And
right.
it's based on call volume, population. There's a lot of different factors. I went through regional 911. I don't know what you want to call it, information session, 10 years ago as a deputy fire chief, and with 9 towns. And when we walked out of there wasn't one town that wanted to do it at the time. The 3 Bridgewater fire departments wanted to do it, to centralize the dispatch for the 3 Bridgewater fire departments. And we were able to get a grant for that, but it just kind of fell through, and the offer was returned. And it is what it is. And that honestly probably wouldn't have saved money either in hindsight. It would have just freed up staffing instead of having a firefighter on the desk. I would have been able to use that person, but I'm doing the same thing now by, keeping dispatch in-house where, we can have a thumb on it, and we can tell the dispatchers how we want it to be done, rather than having to go to a regional center where they're telling you how it's going to be done. And I don't know how Paul feels about that, but I don't really like being told how I'm going to do my job, and it's my job.
No,
Not to be rude, but
We were talking about the staffing on regional dispatch as well today with Chief O'Brien, and we're talking about the number of people that they hire for, dispatch and then supervision and then a director. So the overhead costs are higher. So it doesn't always translate. Not to say that we abandon, we don't look, we don't check. We will always do that as part of our due diligence. But right at the moment, it doesn't seem to be saving money. We are watching Hanson closely.
How many calls come through in the first 6 months of fiscal 21 on the dispatch? Do we know?
yeah, I can get that for you.
Well, I can't hear Paul if he's talking.
Yep, he's looking up a number. He's looking up to see how many calls come in.
I guess another question I would have, this is a new department, so who does, like, both you chiefs kind of co-manage it, or is there a dispatch manager person, or how is it organized?
yeah, we call manage. I mean, Paul obviously has direct oversight because it's in his building, but we
Right.
communicate regularly.
Nice.
Any other questions specific to central dispatch?
Okay, on your question for calls so far this year. Calls for service tracked through our system is 6,980 compared to this same time last year, 5,863. It's a 19.05% increase.
Wow, so it's a lot because of COVID maybe, or it's just, that's a big increase year over year.
It's very hard to predict when you're going to get busy and when you're not going to get busy.
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right, well, if there are no further questions on central dispatch, we can go ahead and move over to police. Chief Herron, you gonna stick around and hang out with us, or are you got a bug?
I can stay if you want, no big deal. I support Paul.
It's your call.
So,
Right, so Brian, you got it. Okay, good, you're already back over. Perfect. All right, Chief, go ahead and you can take it away on yours.
okay, for our level funded, you can see other than contractual, everything stayed the same. You'll see a little jump in my pay, but that's just including insurance policy that we didn't have included in there before. That was part of the contract. Rank differential, we got rid of rank differential because we go sergeant for sergeant now, so there's always a supervisor on every shift. We finally made it up to 6 sergeants where I can do that. College credits is contractual. Shift differential is a figure that we come up with on a 3-year look back and a 5-year look ahead. And that's for nighttime work. Court duty is just based on what we spend in a normal year. It's been a little bit lower last year and this year due to courts being closed. But if court opens up this year, we got a major backlog of cases that I'm gonna have to catch up on, send officers to court. And usually when you send officers to court, it's on overtime. Cover vacation, cover sick cover vacation is just to cover the overtime shifts for vacation. Cover sick stays the same. I do not have a sick problem on this department. Very few people call out sick. Holiday pay is contractual. Overtime and investigation, I average about $13,000 a year. That's why we bumped that up to 12. Overtime, that's what it comes out to. That's the 3-year look back on what we spent. So I try to get these numbers as real as possible. Longevity is contractual. Sick buyback is contractual. Vacation buyback, we very rarely go over that $10,000 number. If guys want to sell back their vacation time, we've changed it in the contract so we can't get croaked on it. We spent a lot last year during COVID because nobody took any time off, so we had to make up for their unused vacation time. Uniform cleaning, it's based on 22 officers, counting me and the deputy chief. Training and education, we dropped down. We technically only have one scheduled for the academy, and he starts February 8th. Uniform expenses, $11.50 per man. Repair and maintenance of vehicle equipment. These are all costs that we've just looked back and set these numbers in there. Vehicle maintenance with a couple new cruisers, getting rid of a couple of the old high mileage and maintenance nightmares. Hopefully I can keep that within 17 grand. DPW does a great job. Their town mechanics helping us out. They're phenomenal. Can't say enough about them. Services for computer, that's paying for all our programs that we use. The office supplies, that's what we figured it would cost per year. We leveled it. You can see next year's level service. We went up to what we actually usually spend. Books and periodicals hasn't changed. Radio equipment hasn't changed. Communication equipment, that's the same. That pays for a lot of our stuff, the licenses and everything. Specialized equipment is things that we haven't thought of, like shredded box we have to pay to get empty, any other miscellaneous costs that we come up. We've averaged over 13 grand a year. That's been budgeted as high as $57,000 a year, but we were able to knock it down and just watch our spending. Dues and memberships is just what we have to pay for. This is our budget presentation.
Did I throw you off? I could put it back to the other screen.
Yeah, could you?
Yeah.
Brian, and then I can share that budget presentation and then I can control it.
Oh, great. That'll be great. All right, let me see if I can kill this. There we go. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. So any questions on the budget we came out with for the level funded at minus 0.2?
Oh, looks good, chief.
That will have a not good effect on my department. We usually have during the day 1.5 SROs. That'll be down to 1 SRO. I don't want to talk too much on my manning just for town safety purposes, but that'll affect a couple of departments where I will not be able to provide service.
All right, I gotta leave, guys. Thank you so much, chief. Appreciate your help. Bye.
Thanks, Joe.
And then on our level service budget, I just went with what to keep up. Our manning is the same, but it's a little bit closer to actual numbers of what would work well for that budget. And that's a 1.3% increase. Any questions from anybody?
I'm going to make you the presenter now, chief, so you can bring that slideshow up.
Thank you, Brian. Can you guys see that?
If you just make it bigger, if you expand your screen.
Brian.
So go to slideshow, start slideshow. Well, that's good enough.
Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to skip the manning, and I had talked to my finance liaisons and Brian. We'll cover manning a little bit later. But this is the department vehicles. We do have a 10-year cruiser maintenance plan. We do have 2 cruisers on order right now. Hopefully they will be in shortly. As you can see, 5 out of our 9 marked cruisers are over 100,000, and that's not counting the idle hours. For every hour of idle, it adds 33 miles of wear and tear to a cruiser. So they do idle quite a bit. The 2 new cruisers that we've purchased are hybrid cruisers. So if the officer's sitting on the side of the road running radar, the car should shut down. And then if they need to leave, it'll kick back on. The state police have been using them for a year and they love them. So I'm real happy with that. If they like them, then we'll most likely like them also. And they seem very dependable. We've always had Fords, and I would like to stick with it. Just for an example, when 3 of our cruisers needed major repair, and since the entire town is pretty much a Ford fleet, Ford was very kind to us and took half of the hours for the manual labor bill, which helped us out drastically because they were $4,000 for each car. So it ended up only being, instead of being 12, it ended up being 6,000. Saved us a lot of money. Department calls for service. 2020, we had 26,121 calls, up from 24,774 calls in 2019. Sorry about that. Calls per population, some of our notes have doubled within the last 3 years. Calls per officer that they answer have nearly doubled over the last 3 years. And officers are responding to 3.4 calls per day on average. Mental health has decreased. I'm not sure if the people, just because they couldn't go to the hospital and seek medical care during the COVID pandemic. This also includes our mental health follow-up, which were drastically reduced due to the COVID pandemic and still are. Domestic violence calls. The calls themselves are down a little bit this year. It decreased by 14.9%. Despite the decrease in 2019, they're still up 39.5% over the last 3 years. Restraining orders, however, make up 32.3% of domestic violence call, and an increase from 21 from 2019. Traffic accidents dropped. As we all know, the roads have been less busy, but we still had 324 accidents in 2020. Public records have dropped, and a lot of that is probably due to accidents dropping down. That means insurance companies aren't looking for public records, and operators and passengers are also not looking for a copy of the report, which is a public record. This is a study that was done in 2019 by the town of Abington, and it showed 5 towns. One of them is Holbrook, but Holbrook's population is quite a bit smaller than us. So we didn't include them in this, even though their budget was higher and their offices were higher, and their call volume was only about 25% of what ours is. So we compared Rockland, Abington, Whitman, and East Bridgewater in 2019. Shows the populations are roughly the same. The amount of sworn officers in Rockland is 33. The amount of sworn officers in Abington is 31. The amount of sworn officers in Whitman is 26, and in East Bridgewater it's 21. We had the highest number of calls compared to those 4 towns. This is the budget breakdown that you just seen from FY 2021 and the level funding. Any questions on that? Try to make it quick, Ron.
No, I think the statistics are always incredible to see. It still amazes me and makes me wonder why that our call volume still consistently goes up and is higher than the other towns. It's just a wonder, but.
I thought it was the water, but we fixed that with the filtration plant, didn't we?
The what?
It was the water. It's the water.
I know, we're gonna have to ask Board of Health.
Yeah.
Does the decrease in mental health calls concern you? That may.
And that survey was conducted by a private company on behalf, municipal research. Just that study that they did on the comparable towns.
Yeah. Yeah, Chief, Melanie asked the question, is the decrease in mental health calls concerning? And do we think,
I mean,
we're
obviously,
hearing a lot of
like
mental health issues going up.
right.
A lot of people just did not want to go seek medical care during this crisis. That could be a factor in it. Another factor that we have to think of in the zero budget is the mental health clinician is split between 7 towns. We're one of the towns, Whitman, Bridgewater, Middleborough, West Bridgewater, and she does not get paid that good from High Point. So each town got together and said we would contribute $4,100. Now, our mental health clinician is on call 24/7. She does not make overtime. She comes out at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and it's a huge tool. We have to send somebody to the hospital, to jail if they really didn't commit a crime, but they're losing the show. She can find us a bed. She has all those connections, since this is what she does. She's basically called jail diversion. With the zero budget, we probably won't be able to contribute our portion. We are going to lose the mental health clinician. Big push right now is for mental health to try to de-escalate these situations. Nobody seems to want to pay for that.
Yeah, the chief mentioned this to me the other day, and we all know that Chief Allen, was a huge advocate of this and taught us a lot about this. Being in the industry, the chief shared with me what this clinician was making for a salary, and I'll honestly tell you it was less than 50% of what a typical clinician in the private less than. It was probably in the 35th to 40th percentile of what a clinician like that would make in the private sector. So when he says that this clinician's being underpaid, not even a question. She should be making, 2.5 to 3 times what she's making now. And Melanie, to the point that you're talking about, and we know that our mental health issues aren't going away; they're only increasing. And it's more and more in the news every day. That's a huge concern. And if we were even to lose our 1/7 of that clinician, I think that would be a great, huge loss. So something we need to think about too. Well, if there's like no other questions, this will have been the fastest police fire budget presentation ever in the history of the Finance Committee. So please, a couple more questions at least.
I mean, the one thing that I would be curious to know, and I know that was a private study that was done, was the percentage of calls that have gone up in our town proportionate to the other towns. Seems it's so much. I'd be curious what types of calls were those? And I think we were kind of comparing from the presentation in that study apples to oranges, because we saw calls go down last year because of COVID, but I'd just be curious.
Well, that study, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but that study was from FY20 data.
FY19.
So that's, that data that they were using is a couple of years old. And
Yeah.
Dan,
Yeah,
I think
municipal
it's going to be interesting because I think this year is going to skew all the statistics.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
Municipal Resources did that in June 2020, and that was they were hired by the town of East Bridgewater, Abington, to do that police department study for them. There's a 162-page study on that. I can get it out to people that Municipal Resources did.
If anybody needs some light reading. Thank you, Mike.
And just to touch on that, one thing I can assure you is, with our past chief and with our current chief, maybe in comparison to the numbers, we're pretty articulate about the data that goes in. We can't speak for how the calls are entered in other towns, but we're pretty articulate with our call reasons and how they go in and how they're entered. And like I said, we can't speak for those other communities.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. Are there any other questions for either Chief O'Brien or Deputy Chief Jenkins or Chief Herron, since he's still with us?
It looks like she's bringing up the last year's stats.
Ah.
Better get that checked.
I'll be out tomorrow. It'll all clear up when our new station's built. Okay, this is last year's stats compared to the year before stats. Excuse me. And you can see the breakdown on calls. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, the one that stands out, right off the bat, is the business and house checks. That's insane.
Yep, that's how you stop break-ins. You got to be out there checking everything.
Just to touch on what we did is also we increased those dramatically. Once COVID hit, we got feedback from a lot of the 55 plus and some of the elderly communities. The nerves, the concerns when COVID first broke out. They were afraid to come out of their houses. So one thing Chief did and we started directed patrols in all the 55 plus communities on every shift. And the feedback we've gotten from the residents and the communities in those communities has been unbelievable. They come up to us, they thank us frequently about that. So there has been a step up in our patrols based on people being confined to their homes. So we've increased the patrols dramatically in the neighborhoods in the 55 plus communities.
Also on this stat, our motor vehicle stops due to COVID were down roughly 2,000 stops We didn't pull over for very minor violations. We only pulled over for major violations. So that dropped the officers' motor vehicle stops by roughly 1,800.
Can you go back to that, the one that went up by 250%? It was the,
Business and house.
yeah.
Yep.
So like, I think community policing's awesome and being present in the 55 plus communities, but would that program change correlate to that call volume going from 1,700 to 6,400? Or is that actual calls?
We have residents who come in and request building checks on their houses every time they go on vacation. So we have to send officers to those houses. What they do is they walk around that house, check all the doors and windows and make sure everything is good, and they log it in. So that accounts for a lot.
We weren't tracking as much as before either. I mean, going prior as all the community checks and the house checks. So we started incorporating that, especially when COVID kicked in.
And just so the first column there with the 6,400, that's calls in calendar year 2020 compared to calls in the next column from calendar year 2019.
Correct.
And mind you, they're probably, each shift is probably, we have two, if we have 3 cruisers on the road and they're doing the house checks, so they're doing 3 or 4 a day. So that number is not too far off when you're considering that now it's being tracked. So you're talking, you're probably talking another, 6 or 7 calls per officer or checks on each shift. So, times 3 every day, 365, over the year.
And this program I'm showing you data viz, all it does is it pulls everything out of our IMC, our computer dispatch system, and it puts it into an easy read.
All right. Are there any other questions or any other stats anybody wants to see? No? Great. All right. Well, like I said, this may go down in history as the shortest fire police presentations ever. All right. Well, thank you very much to all 2 chiefs, deputy chief, for the presentations. Super helpful. And assuming we will have more questions, what we'll do is we'll have questions funnel through the liaisons back to you, and then we'll kind of stay in touch through the process. So thank you very much
Thank you.
for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right. So we're not going to actually have any minutes to vote on tonight. And that's my bad. Melanie and I did a reconciliation recently of last year's minutes and what we had and what we still had. So we do have some minutes that we do need to approve, but there's 2 more sets of minutes that I actually need to write that Melanie was absent for. So I'd like to probably get those written. And so I'm going to probably be sometime within the week sending you all an email with, it's probably going to end up being about 5 sets of minutes to approve. So I'm going to ask if you guys would take a few minutes when you do receive the email to go through them, and then we'll have a vote on them at the next meeting. So that will be kind of our plan. And then our final 2 little pieces, I went to town hall for the first time in, I don't know, ages. And I checked the mailbox. And so I just want to, I miss not being able to see everybody around the table where I would share the stuff. So we received a couple of Christmas cards in the mailbox. So I just want to at least acknowledge that, that Brian and Rebecca and Lee and I can't read who Alvarez's signature is on that, sent us a card, and all of the folks at EBCAM, Zach and Russ, thank you guys, sent us a card. So I just wanted to, before I put them in recycling, wanted to share that with you. And then also I received an email from someone in town whose father used to be, way back in the day, was a long-term serving member of the Finance Committee, Bud Mondo, and he turned 100 last month. Unfortunately, they emailed me, and I hadn't got quite worked out the access to my email account. They had emailed me last month asking if the Finance Committee would be willing to send him a birthday card for his birthday, for his 100th birthday. I did just communicate with Charlotte, and perfectly fine. We're going to still go ahead and send him. So we're going to officially send an official birthday card from the Finance Committee, congratulating him on his 100 years, and thanking him for his service to the Finance Committee.
Oh, nice.
So that's pretty impressive.
It is. Happy belated birthday. That's fantastic.
Yes, happy birthday, Mr. Mondo. And he's also, we all know Gene Bennett from the police department. It's Gene's father. So just the connection there. So I am going to go ahead and send a card out tomorrow in the mail from all of us at the Finance Committee. So, and Dave, you shook your head, so you know Bud, right?
Yeah, he was on the committee with me. Yeah.
Oh, was he? Oh, good.
Yeah. I gotta reach out to him.
Yeah, he'd probably love that.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's just a little older than Betty White.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Betty White's 99, so big.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Something I don't think I'll see, but that's okay. All right. So next meeting.
Wow.
Yeah. Our next meeting is next Monday night. And we'll have our next round of presentations. And I apologize for being tardy getting everybody the materials for tonight. We're going to get a little more coordinated now that we've got a good chunk of the budgets. We'll make sure we have everything in a more timely manner, and then we'll get those out to you a couple days at least ahead of time. So you have, my goal will be even by Friday, so you have at least the weekend to take a peek at it. So I apologize for the last minute on today's materials. So
I just found out my daughter had been on I was trying to get her into a gymnastics class, and she got in. It's Mondays till 5:45, but in Pembroke. So the Monday meetings, I'll probably be closer to like 6:15, 6:20, unfortunately. And
okay.
I'll start the notes for when I jump on, and then I can go back and watch the tapes to fill in the beginning if that's
Okay.
I don't think anyone needs, unless I message you ahead of time that I know I'm going to be super late.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone needs to take over for me on those times or
Okay.
anything. But
Okay.
if my husband's ever home in time, he can bring her and it won't be an issue. But
I thought you were going to make him take the notes.
oh, yeah, that could work too.
Okay, great. Okay, so next, and I have to look at my calendar because I don't remember, but I believe we're starting a little earlier. So yeah, we're starting at 6 o'clock on Monday. Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right. Any other questions or comments from anyone else? Or no, we're all good. Wonderful. Oh, I guess I officially will take entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
A second.
Perfect. Motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 7:34 people.
Yeah, let's keep that